the ambo arrangement. Very fitting.
She did such a great job for all the flowers for the party.
Yes. All right, you want to drive, Ted?
All right. Oh, here she is.
Yes.
Here she is, the star of the hour, the topic of our conversation today.
The Basilica loaned it to us for today.
Yes. It's real. TJ did definitely not just print that.
They made Gabby promise that she would guard it with her life.
Wonderful. Welcome back, everyone, for our, I guess, the fourth or fifth week talking about saints in the season of Advent. We have been all over the world at this point. We have been in Hawaii. We've gone to Scotland. We have been, where else have we gone?
Sicily.
We've been to Scandinavia. And today we are going to North America, to the mountains of Mexico, to talk about Saint Juan Diego and his wonderful vision and all the other people around this incredible event in the life of the world, really. I was reminded that some of these people on our slides are a little mysterious. Next week, we're going to get into some of the saints who are mentioned in the New Testament, and perhaps that's a really good time to go over all of these and remind ourselves who these saints and holy ones are that are on the sides of our altar. So that's just to make sure y'all come back next week. But today, we are here to talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe, Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, La Virgen de Guadalupe, and Juan Diego. And we have with us Lynn Walters, member of the parish, who has a remarkable devotion to the Lady of Guadalupe. And I think you've told me that Juan Diego is your favorite saint or something along those, if we can pick favorites.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So we are thrilled that she's here today and is going to provide some real sort of first-person experience when we talk about this. So I think it's a treat and a joy to have her up here today. So let's move forward one more slide. We know what that looks like. And we'll start by praying the collect. This was written by, I believe, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops for the Virgin of Guadalupe. Let's pray this together. O God,
Father of mercies, who placed your people
under the singular protection of your Son's most holy mother, grant that all who invoke the Blessed Virgin of Guadalupe may seek with ever more lively faith the progress of peoples in the way of justice and peace. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Excellent. Lynn, I wonder if you would...
Can you go back?
Oh, go back.
Okay. So I just wanted to give you a little idea about my personal history with this, and that is in 2017, the same year I started at Transfiguration, I went on a trip to Mexico, and I started in Teotihuacan, and we also went to the Basilica, and our guide said, we do a pilgrimage every year, and it's 26 miles. And I thought, there is no way I am ever walking that far. But I was really sick when I got home from Mexico, and it was undiagnosed for a long time. I was sick for a very long time. And during that time, I thought, well, okay, Guadalupe, if you will be with me throughout this illness, whatever happens, I'll do the pilgrimage. And the next year, my friend, unbeknownst to her that I had made this promise, said, let's do the pilgrimage to Guadalupe next year. And I said, yeah, let's do that. And so we did, and that was our first pilgrimage. We have since done 2 more. All right, so I want to start by telling you one of my favorite stories in the whole world about one of my favorite saints and the Virgin of Guadalupe. But even though it's a very simple, elegant, wonderful story, I want to tell you the background because it's important to understand why this is such a big deal, especially in Mexico. All right, you can go to the next one. There we go. So the Spanish conquest of Mexico happened in 1519 to 1521. By some accounts, more than 23 million native Mexicans died during the conquest.
Say that number again.
23 million. Both from the Spanish weapons of war and the diseases for which the natives had no immunity. And it wasn't only the killing of the bodies, but the destruction of an entire way of life and belief system. They razed every single Aztec temple. On some of them, they rebuilt Christian churches, and some of them, it was a scorched earth policy, and that includes Tepeyac. You can go to the next one. Yeah. So the apparitions of Guadalupe to Cuauhtémoc, I meant to practice that. I didn't. So his baptized name is Juan Diego. So the apparitions happened in 1531, December 9th to the 12th. And I'm going to read you this description of the first. So first off, this is all my favorite story. So when I say this is my favorite part, just take that into account. Okay. All right, so Juan Diego was on his way to Mass on an otherwise ordinary day at Tepeyac. He heard birds singing and stopped to listen. And when the music ended, he heard his name being called, and a beautiful young woman appeared, light surrounding her. She asked him in his native language, not in Spanish, to go to the bishop and tell him to build her a temple on this hill. And that was Tepeyac. It had been a temple, there had been a temple to the Aztec goddess Tonantzin previously. So he went to the bishop, even though he felt unworthy and thought she should ask someone more important. And he had to wait a long time because the bishop said he didn't have time to meet with him. So he came back and he said, you know, the bishop didn't want to meet with me, you should send somebody more important. And she told him, it is absolutely necessary that you personally go and speak about this, and that precisely through your mediation and help, my wish and my desire be realized. So, buoyed by that confidence, he went the next day. You can just leave it on. Go back. So Ted only gave me like 3 slides I could put in here, and I snuck in a couple of more, but...
That was not a limitation. Those were just template slides.
So the next day, Juan goes to see the bishop and waits again a long time. And finally, the bishop says, bring me back a sign. Then we can talk some more. When he arrived home, his uncle Juan Bernardino was sick. Tradition says he had smallpox. And the next morning, he was near death. So Juan Diego left to get a priest to do last rites. And as he came up on Tepeyac, he tried to go a different way to avoid La Virgen, but she walked down the other side of the hill to meet him. And when he explained the reason for this trip, she assured him that his uncle was healed. And for the sign for the bishop, she told him to go to the top of the mountain to pick flowers. And at the top, he discovered all kinds of flowers blooming, even though it was winter. And she arranged them in his tilma, his outer cloak, and he carried them to the bishop. So he's waiting again for the bishop, and these flowers smell so good. And all the servants are like, oh, what does he have? He must have brought a sign. And the bishop, hearing this, is like, oh, he brought a sign. Because you know, the bishop was, he brought a sign. And
Loud eye rolling by bishop.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And so, go to the next slide. Okay, this is really, really one of my favorite parts. He goes to see the bishop and he opens his tilma, and flowers, some of the flowers fall on the ground and others paint her, as she is seen here and as she is seen today at the basilica. And so at that point, of course, the bishop kneels down before her and promises to build her temple. So there is a temple built at the top of Tepeyac. That was the first one. Next to it is a small hermitage where Juan Diego lived for the rest of his life and is buried there. So the next day, the bishop and everybody go back to Tepeyac and to Juan Bernardino, the uncle who was sick, who tells them that, as a matter of fact, at the very moment she told Juan Diego that his uncle was healed, his uncle saw the Queen of Heaven. Okay, is this better?
It will be.
It will be? Okay.
There we go. It is on, Cherry.
Yeah. So Guadalupe had told Juan Diego that her temple would be a place to show people, all people, her love, compassion, and provide her help and protection, and hear their laments, and remedy and cure all their miseries, misfortunes, and sorrows. The more famous quote on this, can you go to the next slide? Oh, no, go back. I did 2 different PowerPoints, and so I'm a little confused. And so the most famous quote from her is, "Am I not here, your mother? Are you not under my shadow and my protection? Am I not your source of life? Are you not in the hollow of my mantle where I cross my arms?"
Can you say that loud and slow and clear for
sorry.
everyone? I don't think anyone can hear that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a little bit nervous.
It's okay.
Okay.
I just want them to hear this.
Am I not here, your mother? Are you not under my shadow and my protection? Am I not your source of life? Are you not in the hollow of my mantle where I cross my arms? And clearly, she was believed. I mean, that is, the basilica is one of the most visited pilgrimage sites in the world. And it provides a lot of economic sustenance for the people of Mexico and beyond. And now you can go to the last slide. This is this year's pilgrimage. This is right around midnight on the 12th. Most pilgrims start on the 11th in order to be there by the time for the midnight mass. So on the picture on the left-hand side, the building with the green roof, that is the new basilica. It was built in the 70s, and you can kind of see around the front, there's all the doors are open, so everyone can see her. To the right of that, with the gold roof, is the first basilica, which is kind of sinking. In case you, yeah.
It's not kind of.
Yeah, no, not kind of.
Yeah.
It's really
sinking.
going down.
Yeah. It's several feet as Mexico City is built on marsh. The city is subsiding. And these huge, heavy stone buildings over the span of 400 years are sinking. So they have had to build steps and ramps and all sorts of things for you to safely enter the building because the doors are not at ground level anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the far right, we can barely see the building on the right. That is the Chapel of Juan Diego. It is dedicated to the indigenous people of Mexico. He was not canonized until July 31st of 2002.
Can you say that again just one more time?
He was canonized July 31st, 2002.
So what is that? That's 300 and...
400 and...
Yeah.
And he is the first indigenous saint of the Americas for the Catholic Church.
And say that again. That is also, I just want to make sure y'all are hearing these things because they're so important.
Yeah.
He's the first, what?
Indigenous saint of the Americas.
There have been lots of indigenous people and lots of indigenous Christians for a long time, and that it took until 2002.
And remind us of the chronology, because I've sat with this story since our pilgrimage 2 years ago, so I've had time to do a little bit of processing, but for most of you, this is probably an introduction to this story. Spain conquers the Aztecs, 1519 to 1521, and this appearance of Our Lady to Juan Diego is 10 years later. So this is not a century later, this isn't generations later, this isn't Spanish conquest and colonialism has taken root in Mexico. This is still, a decade later is like nothing. And this is when this appearance is happening to an indigenous man not in Spanish. So important to like fathom this and what it means for, for indigenous peoples. This Christianity, well, Lynn's going to tell us all about this, so I'm stealing her thunder. Christianity comes with the Spanish, but the real like ignition of faith and fervor of faith happens not through anything that any Spanish priest offered them, but through direct revelation of God.
Yes. Yeah.
That's so important.
And, the bishop, Juan Diego was walking to the church every day, so the bishop wasn't that far. She could have gone to the bishop. But I think this is the Mary of the Magnificat. She doesn't go to the bishop. She goes to the indigenous man. And for those of you who are somewhat familiar with the Catholic Church, Catholicism in Mexico is very different. It's very syncretic with native beliefs as well as the Catholic beliefs. This is over 10 million people went this week to the Basilica. The largest one to date was in 2022, which was the first full pilgrimage after the pandemic, and that was almost 14 million people.
Just in the week. Yeah, and kind of the octave of the feast day.
Yes.
Not the year, it's like 10 million is a lot of people to visit this year. No, like that week.
Yes.
I also think that that's so neat. It reminds me of, pilgrimage is so important, not just in Christianity. All sorts of religions have these big, massive pilgrimages, and like, I wonder what it is about us Americans that are like, ooh, that sounds like a lot of people. I don't think I want to do that. Like, this is a profound human religious experience where there's a destination, there's something holy, there's something that you want to be a part of and you want to see, and everyone's going to do it together. And we sort of do that. We've got political rallies or, things on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial.
The first thing I'm thinking of, frankly, is Times Square on New Year's Eve.
Oh, ooh.
No,
Well,
when do we see masses of people like this? In jubilation.
Yes.
Not for an event per se, but for the sheer act of being together in a place of significance.
Yeah.
The pilgrimage is just, it's amazing. So from Teotihuacan to the Basilica is between 27 and 33 miles. I know because I accidentally did the 33 miles the first year.
Any of that by taxi, Lynn?
No.
Oh,
no,
man.
No.
Wow.
I did want to throw my hiking boots out after that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then I thought, next time I'm going to fly to the airport and walk because it was much closer.
So why is that route? Tell us why that, what does that mean?
So Teotihuacan has pyramids that were built by the Mayans, but when the Aztecs came, the Mayans were long gone, and so the Aztecs said, oh, the gods must have built these for us. And so Teotihuacan is known as the city of the gods. And then Tepeyac was the main temple of Tonantzin, which is an Aztec goddess. So there's that connection. Also, one reason why it was relatively easy for the Spanish to conquer Mexico is because Montezuma had this dream that the gods were going to return, and they were going to return in an unusual type of vehicle, for lack of a better word, and probably by sea. And so, he had told some of the people, hey, and of course he thought the gods were coming to make him a god, right? So, and so he had told people, hey, be on the lookout if you see any unusual vehicles. So when they saw the Spanish ships, they're like, oh, this is that sign. And they run back and they're like, hey, the gods are here. Like, Cortez doesn't know anything about this, right? He doesn't know why they're greeting him and all these people in this way. So it's just such a really sad part of this story that they welcomed the Spanish. Now, to be clear, Mexico during this time was not entirely peaceful. People, there's different factions and they all have their own arguments, and some people wanted the Spanish, i.e. the gods, to be on their side and not on their neighbor's side. because humans. And so that all led to this complete destruction of this area. And also just on a pilgrimage, just a pilgrimage answer to that is, that's a pretty significant distance. So you get to go through all of these stages of pilgrimage on that pilgrimage, like where you get to the point you're like, why am I doing this again? And, and you get to, there's a challenge to it already. Like even though I trained for a year to do it, it was still really hard walking that many miles. And it's cold in the mornings there and it's warm in the afternoons. And so you've got to like bring layers of clothes to change in and out of. But it's a significant enough distance that I was jubilant when I made it to the basilica.
So is that, just so I'm remembering rightly, is this the same essentially journey that Juan Diego makes to go and interact with the bishop, or is he having to make a long journey when he's going back and forth with the story of this experience?
So my understanding was that the church that Juan Diego was going to from his home was between 15 to 17 miles.
Yeah, so a long journey.
So still a long
Yeah.
journey. And clearly he made it often, so it wasn't unusual for him. He was a very faithful Catholic, but also had lived through, the conquest. So by some accounts, he is 45 years old when he has these apparitions, which means that he would have been 20s to 30s during the conquest.
Yeah.
So it's within his recent memory, like his lived memory is the conquest.
The tilma, Len, so you can see it framed as it is here, as it is often beautified. That's fairly life-size to the authentic tilma in the basilica. That's approximately the dimensions, and it hangs, if you can see Space Mountain there. So where the pinnacle of it is, light comes down and cascades down. It is some of the most glorious modern architecture. I mean, it was built in the 70s. It looks like it was built in the 70s, and it is marvelous. It's huge and open and airy. It's absolutely massive. And right beneath it, the tilma hangs, Our Lady hangs this image, this revealed, this epiphany, as in a sense, image hangs on the wall as the focal point of the whole basilica. And the rotunda sits around it, and it probably seats, 5,000-8,000 people inside. I mean, it's massive. But in order to help everyone have as close an experience of it as possible, there is a people mover, like in airports, like a motorized,
Moving sidewalk.
like a sidewalk, a moving sidewalk, that you, behind the altar, because it hangs above the altar, and you get on the moving sidewalk, and you move at this pace, and it moves you through, because of course you can imagine that if they let everybody just come up to it, no one would ever leave, and it would just clog. And you have, millions of people outside. So it has this people mover, and you move, and it's there, and what you're looking at is the tilma of Juan Diego. Like, this is not like a replica down through time, but this is the actual image presented by Juan Diego to the bishop in 1531, which is just really quite extraordinary. If you are willing to go with the story of divine revelation, if you're willing to go with the story that Mary makes this appearance, which of course has happened other places as well. Our Lady of Fatima in Portugal, Lourdes in France. I mean, there's apparitions, there's these experiences, divine. If you're willing to go there, then this is divinely given. If you're not willing quite to go there, it is nevertheless the actual image since 1531 that has sparked the formation of indigenous faith, that image. And so you can pray with it whether you are able to go with its divine nature or not. It is nevertheless a vehicle of grace from God through Our Lady.
I mean, it was the first real holy relic I had seen that had been venerated for this long, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was in awe the first time. And my friends and I called the moving sidewalk the merry-go-round because you can go to the end and through the gift shop and come back around. You cannot do that during the pilgrimage.
But when we were there
Yes.
in February last, yeah, you do. It's not altogether different than Disney. You go on the moving sidewalk inside of Space Mountain, and then you exit it and you go through the gift shop, and you come back around and you can ride it again. Now, in these massive days, that is not permitted, but in lesser days, we were able, and actually when we were there, the people mover was not even working properly, so we were able to stand there in front of it, and it was a normal day. And what were there? There were probably, I don't know,
There were still a
thousands
of
and
people.
thousands of people there that day. Normal day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot. I forgot this was. So if you see at the top, right-hand part, the white building, that is the original. And then, you can go upstairs or a ramp to it. But on the right-hand side, you see there's that figure of Guadalupe there. Can you see it? And
Huge.
yeah, it's very huge. And it has, it shows indigenous people coming, you can't see it in this picture, but there would be indigenous people coming up offering gifts. That is where you end, that's where you start when you do the pilgrimage. All the other gates are closed. The only gate that's open is the one through the marketplace. So everyone is funneled through the marketplace to the end of that fountain, and then you can go through the basilica.
This, yes, Rebecca.
One of the books that you so wonderfully provided to me, Lynn, before I went on sabbatical and made my own pilgrimage to this place, described the work that has been done to sort of verify the validity of this tilma and to compare it to other artifacts from the same time period. And one of the sort of miraculous things about this is that it has been unaffected by time and weathering, and so the image, am I remembering this
Yes.
right, that the image is still every bit as fresh and visible as it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
490-year-old piece of art on fabric.
From the very moment it was revealed to the
Yeah.
bishop,
Yeah.
it's been conserved and protected
Yeah.
as something special.
I mean, there was an incident at one point where someone tried to set off a bomb, and she was not affected. But they do have, there were some other parts that had been around her previously that were all bent out of shape and such, and those are in a display in the front of the basilica. So it's a really remarkable story, and I have read so many things about it really since 2017, and I still learn something new every time I come back to the story.
So did it hang at one time inside the first basilica?
Yes.
And then it was relocated
Correct.
into Space Mountain?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that, but yes. Yeah.
Just planted the,
Well, you'll never not see it that way. Yeah. I can't help but feel like sometimes God gives us the experience we need in order to receive the gift God is trying to give us. The Spanish conquer Mexico, 23 million die from tools of war and infection. And at the head of those armies are warriors with weapons brandishing the cross of Christ, which of course is one of the great awful tragedies of religious-born annihilation, genocide in the world. I can't help but wonder, I'm no student of this, but I can't help but wonder if the sincerity, mercy, and love of Jesus Christ was somewhat suspect by indigenous people receiving that gospel at the hands of people who had just annihilated their whole way of life. Because sometimes we can wonder, perhaps especially those of us who may not have a devotion to Mary and who are very Protestant in our inclinations, like, why would God show up? Why would God give this appearance? Why would God send Mary? Or why is Mary necessary? Well, put yourself in the shoes of people who have just been conquered and obliterated in the name of Jesus Christ. And I can't help but wonder, much like Gabriel is the messenger, if Mary is the messenger sent by God to a people in desperate need of healing and mercy, but who needed a messenger who had a different countenance.
And a mother.
A mother.
That's what I was thinking.
A
A
mother.
to receive her son.
And she speaks like that. That's why I wanted you to reread those words which are printed in huge lettering on the outside of the new basilica in a Spanish translation. But speaking to them, here I am your mother. Am I not your mother, she says.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Sometimes we are given the experience we need. Michael.
Can we say anything more about Juan Diego other than his having the vision? What was his life like after that?
I can, yes. So Juan Diego was, so he had lived outside of Tepeyac, and he was considered to be a somewhat skilled worker, and even maybe had become literate once he converted, because Nahuatl was not a written language, it was only a spoken language. He was married, although it's unclear if he was married at the time of these apparitions or if his wife had passed away. There's no knowledge of any children that he may have had. But what I find really remarkable about him is, he's walked this path so many times, but this day he hears the birds and he stops to listen. He doesn't think, oh, Mass starts in 2 hours and I have to go. He says, oh, what a beautiful sound. I wonder what that could be. Like, what a great gift on this December day to hear these birds. And then she approaches him. I mean, I wonder sometimes, how other ways that God tries to get my attention. And so I am keenly aware of birdsong now and the scent of flowers. But I think she chose Juan Diego because he was an indigenous man. He'd lived through the conquest, that despite his place in life at this point in time, because the Spanish treated all the indigenous people as if they were lesser and, would never be as good as, the Spanish. And he was still willing to go to the bishop and tell him, Our Lady wants you to build her this temple, and to go 3 times. I mean, that has such courage. Like, I have to say, for me, I probably would have been like, to the bishop, like, can't I go just talk to the local priest or something? I mean, but no, he goes to the bishop. He does exactly what she asks, and I think she chose him because she knew he was the right person for the job, and she encouraged him and says, "Nope, it has to be you. It has to be you."
I wonder if she saw something of herself in him.
Yeah.
The person who's willing, who sees the obvious, danger, possible complications or consequences of these actions, and found him who was willing to go and make an appointment with the bishop.
Let
yeah,
it be with me according to your word.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many different layers, and here is Mary. Here is a Mary-like figure who is not bringing like a son into the world, but is presenting this image to the world that has also become loved and revered, and is all over the place. Candles in grocery stores, and the backs of pickup trucks,
Lynn,
and Lynn's earrings.
Can you tell us about the image? Because the image is not, the image is important as we unpack it.
Yes. All right, so the mantle on the Virgin of Guadalupe with the stars reportedly reflects the stars as they were in the night sky in Mexico in December 1531. You can't see it as well on this, but on the gold part of her dress, there are carvings that are the native plants from that area. And you can't see it as well on here, but she has a like a ribbon around her waist, and that is a indigenous, what indigenous women did when they were pregnant. She is one of the very few apparitions of Mary who is pregnant. So she too has the symbolism of she is bringing something new into the world, and it was also really important in the indigenous belief system that they had these stories that it was still night, like something's coming, but it's still night, and here she is in her glory with all of the rays of the sun. So in some stories, the angel at the bottom is actually supposed to be Juan Diego. In other stories, it's one of the cherubs that always travels with Mary on her apparitions. And she is standing on the half moon. And in some versions of it, and I don't remember if it's on the original, there is a snake that she's
Treading upon.
Treading on.
Harkening back to
Revelation.
Yeah.
And,
and Genesis, the
And
beginning
Genesis,
and the end.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So woven into the image is indigenous culture. It's not a Spanish image. Also, by the way, the flowers in the miraculous appearance, the flowers were recognizable to the bishop because they were the roses. They were the flowers he knew from his home in Spain, if I remember correctly.
So I've heard two different stories. One is that they were roses because that's what the bishop would recognize, and the other is that they were native flowers from Tepeyac. But in any event, they were flowers blooming out of season.
Flowers where there shouldn't be flowers.
Exactly.
Flowers where there should be flowers. By the way, there's our Easter egg in the arrangement in front of the ambo. The very roses from the image. Yes. Yeah. We have a few minutes left. I wonder what other questions you have, comments, thoughts.
That's kind of a basic question. What does Guadalupe mean?
Oh.
What's...
Yes. So the Spanish named her Guadalupe after another figure of a Black Madonna from Spain. There is no record of what name she may have given to Juan Diego.
He didn't ask her to identify herself.
He just
I guess.
knew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just knew. Yeah.
I don't know if this is language or something else, but I thought it was interesting that she asked for a temple, which would be more native culture rather than a church.
Yes.
That would go along with the theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if part of that is linguistic because she's speaking to him in her own language, and that would be language spoken. That those words, those terms might have been. I don't know. I'm speculating. Yeah. What other questions do you have? Did you learn anything today? I hope. I always knew vaguely of this, but until we went to Mexico 2 years ago, I didn't know it intimately. I didn't understand it.
And it's also worth noting because this is so incredibly important to our neighbors to the south, who are not only our neighbors to our south, they're our neighbors.
Yeah.
They live around us and they're in our
There were
community.
thousands of people down at the
Yep.
cathedral
Yes.
shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard 12,000 people this year at the downtown church.
I was gonna say, I transferred my membership to Transfiguration from a parish in Oak Cliff, Christ Episcopal Church, which is a bilingual parish. And I tell you, the week before the 12th of December is like the biggest time of that parish's
Yes.
social life.
Yeah.
They have a rosary every night, the 8 days before, and the eve of the 12th is the biggest celebration that parish hosts all year long. It is a big deal.
It is.
It is, and I'm talking about our neighbors. Those were our co-parishioners that attended the Spanish Mass weekly. This was I can't even witnessing it and partaking in those celebrations. I still don't completely comprehend how important to them the Virgin of Guadalupe is. I mean,
So the Virgin of Guadalupe, she also, for both of the Mexican revolutions, the people who were fighting against the whatever elites were in charge at the time, they went to their local church and grabbed her standard before they went into battle. I mean, they knew she was on their side. You read the Magnificat, you read the words from Guadalupe. She is on the side of the poor and the oppressed. And they have continued that tradition. Like, she is not, I think the Catholic Church has probably tried a lot to co-opt Guadalupe, and I just don't think it's really possible for them. On the other hand, the Church in Mexico has tried for years and years and years to have her feast day recognized as an Advent festival, and it's not happened yet.
What would that mean? I don't know what that means.
I honestly have no idea what it means either, but maybe it would just be additional recognition outside of Mexico for.
That it would be on the big calendar.
Global.
Yes,
A
yes,
global
yes,
observance.
yes,
I see. Ooh, cool.
So that's the process of the church coming into
Yes.
a local culture, enculturation, and then there's that culture that the church has gone into that seeps back out
Yeah,
into
wow.
the wider landscape.
Cool. Okay, next week, friends. Ted, tell us all about it.
Next week, we're going to spend a little more time with some of the saints that we recognize from the New Testament, specifically St. Thomas, whose feast day is December 21st, and who is credited with bringing Christianity to the subcontinent of India. So we're going to India next week, and we look forward to seeing you all there.
So we'll hopefully enjoy your presence one more time. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Be to God.
Thank you, Len.
Thanks.